All right, welcome back, grade 10s. Our first objective today is looking at the fall of Rome and the potential parallel fall of the United States of America. And then after that, the second lesson of the day is going to be looking at the first part of our A2, which says the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. So we're going to be creating two lectures today, one that introduces this first topic and one that introduces the second. So the assignment that I'd get you to do, if you're working at home, is simply take some note on why Rome fell, and then try to see if you can see any parallels with how America could fall in the future. Nothing to hand in there, just take some notes that you could use in a future essay. The second assignment today, when we look at the strong do what they can, the weak suffer what they must, again, you're going to be taking some notes on that, not handing in anything for it, because I will be marking on this when I mark your essay. So nothing due today, but definitely some building blocks and stuff we'll see in the future. So first things first, let's get through some of the articles. If America is, maybe later, if America is anything like history's great civilizations, then this is the beginning of the end. So yesterday we looked at the concept of fatal flaws. You read an essay about fatal flaws. That great civilizations have fatal flaws, and we can assume that the United States, a great civilization, it's not going to be immune to the fatal flaws that others have had. So as we read through this article, it's looking at some of the history that could be seen as a warning that perhaps could delay the decline and fall of the American empire. So the decline and fall of the Athenian Republic, which was ironically published in 1776 at the birth of America, we can learn, the United States of America can learn something from the fall of the Athenians, the ancient city-state of Athens, and see if it potentially can influence them. So the average of the world's great civilizations before they decline is about 200 years. So looking at the United States, the revolution is in the 1770s. We're already 200 years past that. Now they weren't a great civilization right at the moment of the revolution. So it took some years for them to become a great civilization. But if you make the argument that they're a great civilization by the mid-19th century, then they only have a few decades left. So the fall of the United States is something that is likely then within your lifetime. And the United States is Canada's greatest ally economically and militarily. A fall of the United States will impact Canada. So, the civilizations have progressed in this sequence from bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to great courage, from courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, from abundance to selfishness, from selfishness to complacency, from complacency to apathy, from apathy to dependence, from dependence back to bondage. So in the United States, where are we at? What level would you say the United States is at? Well, they had the courage to revolt, right? This is the American Revolution. Before the American Revolution, it was a country based on different spiritual faith. So it was a spiritual country that had the courage to revolt against the British Empire, and it was a land based on liberty. America, the land of liberty. And the first decade, the 19th century, the first half of the 20th century, the United States had the American dream, the time of abundance, right? That the American economy was unparalleled. There was a time when the United States had more than 80% of the world's wealth. But then people began to look into America and they saw selfishness. That the United States may be a dream to many, but there was a nightmare part of it. And that was the individual selfishness that was beginning to be exposed as a corruption from within. And out of this selfishness, we're also seeing perhaps some complacency. So some people are becoming complacent, that they're not driven by the same work ethic. They think that they just deserve stuff. That they take things for granted. They're complacent with democracy. They're not willing to help to flourish or grow their democracy, to help water their democracy. They don't want to be active, but they don't want to lose those rights, but they don't want to do anything to protect them. They want the rights, but not the responsibility, so they're becoming complacent. They're becoming complacent economically as well, that they just expect that a good life is their birthright, that they don't have to work for a good life. So what comes out of complacency? Maybe apathy. They just don't care anymore. Do they care about democracy? Well, maybe we're not in the point of complete apathy yet in the United States, because we see, two halves of America struggling with each other. I didn't see apathy in the election. I saw two parts of America fighting each other. But we do see some evidence of apathy in the past when people don't even bother to vote. They're like, well, voting's too much work. I don't really care. Or there's some people that, rather than working for themselves, they become dependent. So in Social 30, we talk about a culture of dependence, where it's easier to not work for yourself, but become, dependent upon the state. The state will provide for me. Social welfare will provide for me. And once you commit to social welfare, as many economists would suggest, a state big enough to provide everything for you economically is a state big enough to take everything away. That socialism is the road to serfdom. And that's this idea of going back to bondage. So if this is meant to mirror the American story, then some would suggest that America will return back to bondage because we will become dependent upon the state. Because we would rather have the state offer us assistance than to work for ourselves. So that's the warning coming from Athens, and that's how America becomes a dictatorship. That the American democracy is not going to fall because an outside force is going to take it away. It's going to fall because the inside people, the Americans, are going to let it slip away. Question?
War is not necessarily good, but it does unite countries.
Yeah, you're right.
And so, in a way, the reason for Rome's such long existence would be because of its constant war efforts.
Yeah, so for a empire or a nation to survive, it needs something to unify the people. And sometimes an alien or foreign threat, it's us against them, is a great unifying factor.
Because, in World War II, the U.S. wasn't particularly part of it in the sense geographically, because they were sending people instead of being attacked.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of put them in the state of, we may become in bondage again. So
when my country's at war, I'm at war, and I'm loyal to my country. You're absolutely right.
And
war is a rallying factor.
And then it kind of resets that cycle.
Yep.
And you go back to thinking I'm at bondage, but not. So then you're at spiritual faith and great courage and liberty.
So then, if there is no war, you may create a war. It's called wag the dog. You create a war so that you can unite the people. It's kind of like what Orwell writes about in 1984, when Oceania is at war with these other countries, that the citizens of Oceania, they don't even know these other countries, but the war is actually just a manipulation by the government to control the people. So you're right, war does unite the people, but dangerously so. We may have wars that are created not because they're necessary, but just to try to unite the people. So we have this second document that looks at a parallel between the United States and Rome. And there's many sections of it. But we do have some videos we're about to look at. And again, the purpose is at the end of this mini lesson, I want you to be able to see the tragic flaws, the fatal flaws that great nations have. And I want you to be able to try to compare the United States today with some of the falls like the Roman Empire of old. So Rome reached its peak of military power around the year 107, when Trajan completed the conquest of modern-day Romania. The empire peaked in size, but some would say it had already peaked by almost every other measure. So the United States reached its peak relative to the world, and in some ways its absolute peak as early as the 1950s. In 1950, the United States produced 50% of the world's GNP, gross national product, and 80% of the world's vehicles. Now, it's about 21% of the world's GNP and 5% of the vehicles. And if it hasn't already been passed, and this year's been muddy economically because of the pandemic, the United States will be passed by China within your lifetime. So as we see the United States, the economic power of the United States be usurped by the Chinese, then some of the international political power of the United States also gets taken by the Chinese. So we're seeing a great international transfer of power from the Americans to the Chinese, and it's somewhat due to this cycle of decline of America. It's not just the United States, it's Western civilization that's in decline. In 1910, Europe controlled almost the whole world, politically, financially, militarily. Now it's becoming a bit of a Disneyland with real buildings and a petting zoo for the Chinese. So the United States, the United States, the British, the French, the Germans, the Russians, if you go back to 1910, we carved up most of the world. But now, we've seen the decline of Western civilization, including the US, and we've seen the reemergence of Asian powers like China. And India might be the next one to reemerge after that. So, we're going to watch some quick videos now. These articles are going to be in here if you'd like to kind of go down this rabbit hole a little bit deeper. So I have left a link to the article in the lesson if you'd like to explore this academically a little deeper. But we are going to stop the video, and we're going to watch the TED Talk together and a couple other related videos, sorry. And then the goal here is that we should be able to link the fall of Rome with the fall of the United States.